At 6:14 local time, above the cold gray stretch of ice east of Greenland, the cockpit is silent. Not peaceful, silent. The U.S. Navy aircraft holds its altitude with steady precision. The engines are balanced, the nose fixed on course, and outside the canopy, the Arctic sky stretches in a hard shade of blue. Below, the white glare of ice reflects back through scattered layers of cloud. Visibility is clear. The weather is manageable. Nothing in the environment suggests that anything unusual is about to happen. Then the warning tone cuts in. A sharp mechanical chirp snaps through the headset. Rear quadrant radar warning. The pilot's eyes move instantly to the HUD. Two contacts appear behind the aircraft, low and closing fast. Very fast. There is no friendly transponder signal, no cooperative identification, only speed, direction, and distance changing rapidly on the display. From this moment, the numbers matter more than anything. Closing rate, bearing, altitude, separation. The contacts are accelerating past 600 knots, and the distance is shrinking second by second. This is not random traffic. It is not a weather effect. It is not a navigation error. This is an intercept. The pilot does not react immediately. His hands remain light on the controls. The throttle stays where it is. The aircraft continues straight through the thin Arctic air, exactly as procedure demands. At this speed and altitude, sudden movement can create more problems than it solves. A quick glance confirms what the instruments already showed. Two Russian fighter jets slide into view behind him, dark shapes against the blue sky. They are close enough now to make out the shape of the wings, the shadows around the engine intakes, and the faint shimmer from the exhaust. They are not keeping a respectful distance. They are moving in. No radio call comes through, no warning, no attempt to coordinate over international air frequencies, just silence. And in military aviation, silence can say a great deal. The pilot keys the mic. Two fast movers approaching from aft. No hails, no IFF. His voice is calm, short, controlled. On the other end of the link, the command network is already tracking the same picture. Every radar return, every course change, every meter of closing distance is being recorded and watched in real time. Inside the cockpit, the world narrows. Wind noise rises slightly as the aircraft moves through the thinner air. The HUD remains steady. Speed, altitude, heading, engine data. Everything stays normal. That is the point. The Russian jets begin to maneuver. One moves higher and forward, drifting toward the American aircraft's left side. The other stays farther back and offset to the right, holding just outside the pilot's main forward view. It is a pressure formation. One aircraft visible, one aircraft waiting behind. A formation designed to control space, attention, and reaction. The separation drops below 1,000 meters. At these speeds, that distance disappears quickly. The pilot feels the moment sharpen. Not panic, not fear, awareness. Every training flight, every simulator scenario, every briefing about high-speed intercepts over cold water comes back into focus. The rule is simple. Do not react emotionally. Do not flinch. Do not give them an opening. The Russian jet on the left moves closer. Too close. Its nose creeps forward, edging toward the American aircraft's flight path. A slight vibration passes across the canopy as disturbed air rolls over the aircraft. The margin for error is now measured in meters. At this speed, one poorly timed roll, one unnecessary throttle change, or one overcorrection could turn a tense encounter into something far more serious. Still, no radio call. Still, no acknowledgement. The pilot reports again, his voice level and professional. Lead contact maneuvering aggressively, closing inside safety envelope. On the HUD, the closure rate rises. The Russian jet surges ahead and crosses nearer to the American aircraft's nose. Not a full cut across the flight path, not yet, but close enough to send a clear message. Close enough to force a decision. This is the moment these encounters are built around. Turn away and it may look like retreat. Turn hard and the risk increases. Follow them and the situation escalates. Hold steady and you show control, but only if you can truly hold it. The pilot holds it. Hands steady. Course unchanged. Wings level. The American aircraft remains locked on its original heading, moving forward as if the intruders are not there at all. Behind the scenes, the sensors capture everything. Angles, emissions, spacing, movement patterns. Every second becomes part of the record. But in the cockpit, the response is restraint. The Russian jet moves even closer. For a brief instant, its shadow flashes across the nose of the American aircraft. Then the warning system spikes again. Proximity alert. The cockpit feels smaller. Every muscle wants to react, but the pilot resists the instinct to move too soon. This is where discipline matters. This is where training takes over. And then, almost as quickly as it began, the Russian jet pulls upward and slides away, climbing through the thin air and opening the distance it had just threatened to close. The second jet follows, easing back and widening the formation. The immediate pressure fades. But the encounter is not over. Because above the frozen edge of the North Atlantic, Moments like this do not happen by accident. And this was only the first move. The airspace begins to settle, but the tension remains. The American aircraft continues on course, engines steady, wings level. The Russian fighters have moved farther out, but they have not left. They remain close enough to matter, close enough to turn a routine flight into a serious test of discipline if anyone makes the wrong move. Inside the cockpit, the pilot does not relax. This is the phase where errors are most likely to happen. Not during the first shock, not at the closest moment. Afterward. When the pressure begins to fade, when the mind starts filling in gaps, when assumptions become dangerous. That is exactly why the rules exist. The pilot moves through the instrument scan with practiced rhythm, airspeed stable, altitude holding, engines normal, controls responsive. The aircraft itself has not changed, only the space around it has. And that is precisely what the procedures are built for. Maintain course, maintain speed, record everything. The Russian jets reposition again. One drifts higher, slightly forward of the American aircraft. The other drops lower and falls back just enough to stay outside the pilot's direct line of sight. The shape of the formation is deliberate. It tightens the space around the American aircraft without crossing one clear, undeniable boundary. Close enough to apply pressure, far enough to claim it was routine. The pilot recognizes the pattern immediately. This is not improvisation. This is method. He does not chase them with his eyes. He does not turn his head after every movement. The aircraft comes first. Awareness comes from the instruments, not instinct. The HUD continues feeding clean, precise information. Relative bearing, closing rate, vertical separation. The numbers do not exaggerate. They do not play games. They simply show what is happening, even when the behavior outside the canopy is meant to confuse the picture. A short transmission comes through the headset. Command acknowledges the contact. No new instructions. No change in posture. That silence is intentional as well. In the U.S. Navy, escalation is not driven by emotion. It is handled by procedure. Every pilot knows the thresholds before ever facing a real intercept. How close is too close? What actions show serious intent? When pressure becomes something that requires a different response. The Russian jets test those boundaries carefully. They move closer again, then settle. One slides sideways, matching speed, holding position just off the American aircraft's left wing. The distance is tight, but still manageable. Any closer and disturbed airflow becomes a serious concern. Any closer, and there is little room left to correct an error. The pilot gives them nothing. No abrupt movement, no sudden correction, no visible reaction. From the outside, it might look passive. Inside the cockpit, it is controlled restraint. And that may be the hardest skill to master in military aviation. Anyone can move the controls. Not everyone can keep them still. The recording systems continue running in the background. Radar warning receivers log intermittent sweeps, not a full targeting lock. Not a clear escalation, just enough energy to be noticed, just enough to send a message. The pilot notes it mentally, but does not report it as more than it is. Not yet. There is no reason to sharpen the situation unnecessarily. The data is already flowing. Analysts will see the same picture in real time. The American aircraft remains predictable. And here, predictability is strength. It limits the other side's options. It forces them to either back away or take a clearer step forward, one that cannot easily be explained afterward. The Russian formation tightens for a moment, then opens again. A push, a pause, another test. This is where experience matters. A less disciplined response, an unnecessary bank, a sudden power change, or a reactive climb would give the encounter a new shape. It would create angles, uncertainty, and risk. It would turn close, flying into a chaotic situation. Instead, the pilot lets the moment stretch. The aircraft continues through the cold air, steady and unshaken, unmoved, unprovoked. Every second that passes without a reaction changes the balance. The pressure begins to shift. The next decision moves back to the other side. A few more seconds pass. The Russian jets hold their positions, but the sharp edge is fading. Their movements become less precise. Their spacing begins to widen by small but noticeable margins. The encounter has not ended, but it has stabilized. That is the objective. No dramatic gestures, no argument over the radio, no visible show of force, just control. Because in moments like this, far from carriers, far from immediate support, above water and ice, where there is no room for carelessness, the aircraft that gets through is not always the one that moves first. It is the one that refuses to be pushed into the wrong move. And up here, above Greenland's frozen horizon, the rules are holding. Then the geometry changes again. The Russian fighters move with purpose now, not all at once, but in small increments. One edges forward slightly above the American aircraft's altitude. The other drifts behind and lower, just far enough to remain outside the pilot's immediate peripheral vision. It is a staggered formation designed to compress space and create the feeling of being boxed in without crossing a single obvious line. From the cockpit, it feels tight. From the systems, it looks different. Every maneuver creates data. Every adjustment in altitude, speed, and angle leaves a signature. The American aircraft's sensors are not just watching. They are listening, recording, analyzing, and processing everything at machine speed. The Russian jet flying higher sweeps its radar again. Not a firm track, not yet. Just a short electronic pass across the spectrum, a brief signal meant to be felt without pushing the situation too far. It is the kind of move designed to unsettle the crew, to announce presence without making the next step obvious. The warning receiver catches it instantly. The pilot does not react. That decision matters. Any reaction would give the other side information. It would show that the pressure is having an effect. It would give meaning to their move. Instead, the American aircraft remains steady. No feedback, no visible response. The signal is logged, time-stamped, and sent quietly through the data link. Up here, the real exchange is not happening through words. It is happening electronically. The Russian jets begin moving closer, not suddenly, not wildly, just enough to tighten the space around the American aircraft. Their exhaust disturbs the airflow, and a light vibration moves through the airframe. It is not enough to throw the aircraft off balance, but it is enough to remind the pilot how narrow the margin is at this speed. This is where pressure usually reaches its highest point. It is also where errors are most likely. The Russian pilot above slides forward again, briefly placing his nose near the American aircraft's forward quarter. It is a positioning move, a way of suggesting control without saying anything over the radio. But by moving that way, he reveals more than he may understand. Another radar sweep, another signal. This time, the frequency is slightly different. The contact lasts slightly longer. The American systems capture every detail. Every change becomes a fingerprint. Later, analysts on the ground will be able to rebuild these moments second by second. How long the signal lasted, how closely it followed, how it changed with distance, angle, and movement. Patterns appear quickly when someone repeats the same behavior under pressure. Then the lower Russian jet makes its move. It accelerates forward from behind, closing the distance quickly, too quickly. Inside the American aircraft, the pilot feels the airframe vibrate again. This time, the movement is sharper. Disturbed airflow rolls beneath the wings, subtle but unmistakable. The proximity alert flashes for a moment, then disappears. At the last second, the Russian pilot corrects, sliding away to the side. Too close. That correction says something. It says the moment is becoming harder to manage. It says the margins are shrinking. It says the pilot on the other side of the canopy is adjusting in real time, and the risk is no longer theoretical. The American pilot still does not move. That restraint is not passive. It is intentional. By refusing to change course, the American aircraft places the responsibility back on the Russian pilots. Every adjustment is now theirs. Every tight pass is theirs to explain. Every narrowing gap belongs to them. The airspace feels crowded, but the American aircraft remains predictable. And in this situation, predictability becomes a trap. The Russian pilots are waiting for a reaction, a climb, a turn, a breakaway. Anything they can read as hesitation, but nothing comes. The encounter begins to stall. Their options become smaller, move closer, and the pressure becomes impossible to explain away. Move back and the message changes. So they try one more time. The lead Russian jet slides across the American aircraft's nose, closer than before. Not fully across the flight path, not directly into it, just near enough to trigger the aircraft's warning systems again. The alert sounds. This time, it stays longer. The pilot feels his grip tighten by instinct, but his hands do not move. The aircraft stays on course, cutting cleanly through the thin Arctic air. No sudden turn, no sharp breakaway, no reaction that could give the moment a new direction. For a few seconds, the distance feels like it is being measured in heartbeats. Then the Russian jet climbs hard, pulling away and leaving the line it had been pressing. The second fighter follows, widening its turn and increasing separation. The formation opens, and that movement says more than any radio call could. They have reached the edge of what they can safely manage. They have taken the pressure as far as it can go without pushing the situation beyond control. Now the risk is beginning to outweigh the message. The American aircraft remains steady as the space around it opens again. Behind the scenes, the data stream is complete. Every maneuver, every signal, every pause, all of it is logged without emotion. Up here, there are no dramatic exchanges over the radio, no visible display of force, no sudden escalation, but the encounter has already changed. The side that came in to apply pressure has given away more than it meant to reveal. Then the sky tightens again. For a few seconds after the Russian jets widen their spacing, the airspace almost feels open. The American aircraft continues forward, engines steady, attitude unchanged. But experience says this phase is rarely finished just because it looks that way. And then it happens. The lead Russian fighter snaps back in. No slow approach, no gradual drift. One moment it is offset and climbing. The next it rolls sharply and drops across the American aircraft's forward path. The closing rate spikes. The distance falls from hundreds of meters to only a narrow margin. This is no longer just pressure. This is a razor-thin pass. The proximity warning bursts through the cockpit louder and more persistent than before. The HUD flashes new cues, showing the small corridor of safe air shrinking by the second. The airflow over the wings turns rough as the American aircraft enters disturbed air from the Russian jet. The aircraft shudders, not violently, but clearly enough that no one could mistake it. At this speed, there is no room for guesswork. The pilot's instincts demand action. A bank, a pitch change, anything to create more space. But instinct is exactly what can make a tense moment worse. Training takes over, hands stay fixed, throttle remains set. The aircraft holds its line, trusting discipline, procedure, and the margins calculated long before this encounter began. The Russian jet cuts across the nose. For a fraction of a second, it fills the forward view. Intake, fuselage, wing route. The details lock into memory, not because of drama, but because of proximity. The clearance is extremely small. A little less space, and the outcome could have been very different. The Russian pilot pulls up sharply. The fighter climbs through and away, its exhaust washing over the canopy in a distorted shimmer. The turbulence hits hard, like a sudden shove. The aircraft rocks, then steadies as the control systems absorb the disturbance. Then silence follows. Not just radio silence, total silence. No warning tones, no new alerts. Only the low, steady hum of the engines and the thin sound of air moving across the canopy. The American pilot exhales slowly. Not in relief, in focus. Because the danger has not fully passed. The second Russian fighter hesitates. It remains behind and below, holding position as if waiting for direction or watching to see what the American aircraft will do next. This is the point where situations like this can spiral. One side reacts, the other side answers. A turn becomes pursuit, pursuit becomes intent, but nothing happens. The American aircraft does not follow, it does not climb, it does not maneuver to reclaim space. It simply continues forward, unchanged, refusing to give the encounter any new momentum. That choice matters more than anything. The lower Russian jet begins to drift outward, slowly at first, then more clearly. The spacing increases, its movement steadies. The posture changes from forceful to cautious, the subtle sign of a pilot reassessing the risk. The lead Russian jet levels off above, now well clear of the American aircraft's nose. It does not return to the same intercept geometry. The pressure pattern has broken. Inside the cockpit, the pilot reports calmly. Unsafe pass observed. Separation increasing. No emotion, no emphasis, just fact. The command network receives the update instantly. Analysts watching the live feed see the same picture. The encounter has reached its peak, and now it is beginning to fall back. The most intense move had already happened, and it failed to get the reaction it was designed to provoke. The Russian pilots had moved beyond the point where their actions could easily be described as routine. That matters. In the air, intention is not judged by statements. It is judged by geometry. How close, how fast, how often. That pass across the nose was not random. It was a choice. And once that choice was made, it could not be taken back. Now the airspace begins to open again. The Russian fighters continue drifting away, their movements smoother now, less confrontational. They are still there, still visible, still close enough to matter. But the edge is gone. The moment has passed. The American aircraft continues forward. No showy maneuver, no excited radio call, no visible response beyond the mission itself, just controlled continuation. That restraint is not weakness, it is the final message. The encounter did not end with chaos. It ended with discipline, with pressure held, absorbed, and finally returned by refusing to react. Above the frozen horizon, the most intense moment is already behind them. But the consequences of that moment are only beginning to take shape. The Russian fighters keep moving outward, their silhouettes shrinking against the pale Arctic sky. They do not leave immediately. They do not need to. Their presence has already been felt. Their message has already been delivered. What matters now is how the encounter will be understood afterward. And who controls the story. Inside the American cockpit, nothing changes. Altitude holds, heading holds. The engines run smooth and steady. The pilot does not turn to watch the fighters pull away. There is no need. The systems confirm what the eyes no longer have to track. Separation is increasing, closing rates have leveled. The airspace is no longer compressed. The immediate pressure is over. But the event itself is not. Behind the scenes, the encounter is already being rebuilt in exact detail. Every second of flight, every bearing change, every radar sweep. From the first warning tone, the American aircraft has been recording the entire sequence. This is the part most people never see. Modern aerial encounters are not decided only in the sky. They are also decided afterward in analysis rooms, operations centers, and intelligence teams, where raw information becomes understanding. The Russian pilots came close. Too close. They flew assertively, tested boundaries, and pressed into a geometry that left very little room for error. On the surface, it looked like confidence, a display of control, a reminder that they were willing to operate in a tense and unforgiving part of the sky. But they did not see the other side of the exchange. Every approach angle revealed something. Every correction showed how the aircraft handled pressure. Every radar signal, no matter how brief, left a trace. Patterns appeared. Habits became visible. The closer they flew, the more they revealed across the electronic spectrum. And the American aircraft never had to answer back. That silence was deliberate. In naval aviation, restraint does not mean the absence of power. It means power kept under control. By holding course and refusing to react emotionally, the American pilot forced the encounter into a narrow path. From that point on, the only way for the Russian pilots to continue applying pressure was to accept more and more risk. Eventually, they chose not to. And that choice tells its own story. The final close pass, the one that triggered the proximity warnings and forced the Russian fighter to climb away, was the moment the balance changed. It showed how thin the margin had become. It showed how close pressure had come to crossing into something neither side could easily control. From that point forward, the encounter was already moving toward its end. The Russian fighters pulled away not because they were chased, and not because the American aircraft changed course. They pulled away because continuing no longer served the purpose. The risk had grown too high, and the American aircraft had given them nothing to use. Up here, leverage comes from reaction. They got none. As the American aircraft flies on, the Arctic stretches endlessly below. Ice fields, dark water, no easy place to land, no quick help nearby. This is why discipline matters so much in these regions. A single serious mistake here would not be resolved in minutes. It could turn into a long and difficult operation in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. Both sides know that. And most of the time, that knowledge is what keeps these encounters from going too far. On this flight, discipline held. No open frequency argument, no dramatic display, no sudden escalation. The American aircraft simply continued its mission, recorded what happened, and left the airspace the same way it entered it. Steady, controlled, unmoved. To the outside world, it might look like nothing at all. No dramatic footage, no obvious clash, just aircraft crossing paths somewhere high above the ice. But to anyone who understands aerial operations, the outcome is clear. One side tried to create pressure through distance and positioning. The other absorbed that pressure through discipline. One side relied on spectacle, the other relied on procedure. And only one of those approaches can hold safely when the margin for error disappears. As the Russian jets fade into the distance, the American aircraft stays on task. The mission continues. Fuel checks resume. Navigation updates continue. Routine procedures return to the cockpit. But this flight will not feel routine when it is reviewed later. Because up here, above Greenland's frozen edge, a line was tested without being crossed. Pressure was applied without being returned. And through that restraint, a quiet advantage was gained. No one has to announce it. No one has to celebrate it. In modern aerial encounters, control is not proven by coming closest. It is proven by never needing to.